You know the scene, right? That bare room, the single light bulb hanging down, a couple of detectives leaning in close. We've all seen it in movies and on TV a million times. But what if I told you that everything we think we know about police interrogations is just flat out wrong? Well, today we're going to tear down that whole idea and find out what really works. Yeah, this is the classic line. It's all about pressure, it's about psychological games, and it's all laser focused on getting one thing, a confession. But here's the thing. What if the goal itself, the confession, is the problem? And this question changes absolutely everything. What if you stop hunting for a confession and start searching for the truth? Suddenly, it's not a battle of wills anymore. It becomes a process of discovery, all about gathering information that's actually accurate and reliable. So right here, you can see the two completely different philosophies side by side. You've got the old school accusatorial model on one hand. It's all about control, manipulation, and squeezing out that confession. And then you have the science-based model, which is about building rapport and gathering information. The goal you start with completely changes how you play the game. Okay, so why the big shift? Well, it turns out the old way has a cost, a really, really high cost. What happens when getting that signature on a confession becomes way more important than actually finding out what happened? Well, the biggest problem is something called psychological coercion, and it is tragically real. See, when you put someone under that much stress, when you manipulate them, deprive them of sleep, people can be pushed to confess to things they didn't even do. And that doesn't just give you bad info. It leads to some of the worst miscarriages of justice you can imagine. It destroys innocent lives. Now, this change didn't just happen overnight. You can actually see this clear evolution over time. Before the 1930s, you had the third degree. We're talking actual physical abuse. That eventually gave way to the confrontational model, which was less physically violent, but still super aggressive psychologically. It's only really since about 2010 that we've moved into what we call the science-based era, where the focus is finally on using ethical, proven techniques. We've moved from brute force to brain power. And a huge part of that evolution meant throwing out some old myths, especially this idea that a detective can just read someone's body language to tell if they're lying. It turns out all those so-called tells are basically pseudoscience. They're unreliable and can lead interviewers to make some seriously wrong judgments. So what kind of methods are we talking about? Well, a lot of these popular techniques, like trying to analyze tiny micro-expressions on someone's face, or the whole idea from neurolinguistic programming that where you look tells you if you're lying, they've all been pretty much debunked. Study after study has shown there's just no reliable link between these little tics and actual deception. They are not the magic lie detectors that pop culture makes them out to be. And all of this leads us right here to the new paradigm. Science-based interviewing, or SBI for short. This is that huge fundamental shift away from confession hunting and toward a system for gathering really high-quality information. So what is SBI, really? At its heart, it's all about being information-driven. It's not a list of trick questions. It's a whole framework that's guided by actual scientific research into things like memory, psychology, and communication. The entire goal is to create an environment where the truth is the easiest thing to tell. And listen, this isn't some fringe academic theory. SBI techniques are developed and rigorously tested using the scientific method. A lot of the research is actually funded by the High-Value Detainee Interrogation Group. We're talking a collaboration of experts from the FBI, the CIA, and the Department of Defense. This is a serious, evidence-backed movement happening at the very highest levels. I think this quote from Gary Kortner just nails the whole spirit of it. It's about using data and research to complement an investigator's experience, not replace it. It's about using every single tool you have to get to the truth, not just to check a box and close a case. Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, but how does it actually work? Let's dig into a couple of the practical tools that make science-based interviewing so different and, frankly, so much more effective. All right, one of the most basic but powerful tools is a simple little acronym, TEDS. And this isn't about setting traps or asking clever questions. It's all about how you structure a conversation to just get the most information possible. TEDS stands for tell me, explain, describe, and show me. Now notice something here. None of these are yes or no questions. They're open-ended prompts. They're designed to get someone talking, to give what's called a free narrative.
basically to let them tell their story in their own words without the interviewer constantly interrupting and influencing them.
And these TDES questions, they form the top of what's called the questioning funnel. You start really broad to get that big picture. Then you start to drill down with more specific questions, the who, what, where, when, why, but only about details they've already brought up. It's only at the very bottom of the funnel, at the very end, that you use those closed yes or no questions to confirm specific facts. It's a structure designed to work with how our memories work, not against them.
Now here's another incredibly powerful technique. It's called SUE, which stands for the strategic use of evidence. And get this, what if I told you the best way to use the most important piece of evidence is to not mention it at all? At least, not at first. Here's the magic of how it works. Instead of walking in and slapping the evidence down on the table, you first let the subject tell their entire story. You use TEDS, you use the funnel, and you get their complete, uncontaminated version of events. You lock it in. Then, and only then, late in the interview, you start revealing pieces of evidence. For a deceptive person, this makes it incredibly hard to adapt their story without contradicting themselves. It exposes the lies clean as day.
So when you put it all together, all these tools and techniques serve one central idea. Information is supremacy. It's not about winning a shouting match in an interview room. It's about winning the entire investigation with solid facts.
So what's the bottom line? It's this: a statement that hasn't been contaminated by the interviewer and that can be backed up by other evidence is the absolute gold standard. It's so much more powerful, so much more reliable than a confession that was gotten under pressure. High-quality information, that's what builds strong cases. That's what leads to actual justice.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? The goal is so simple but so powerful. In any investigation, more good information is always better than less. That is the entire guiding light of this science-based approach. And it is a world away from the old days of coercion and confrontation. Which brings us to one last question, a question that really gets to the core of this whole thing. For an investigator, what is actually better evidence? A confession that might be false, or a known lie that directly contradicts the facts? Something to think about.